Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates of Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Josh Porter. Coach Porter is the founder and CEO of Big Dog Barbell and an inclusive adaptive PE teacher in Roswell, Georgia. Porter was a recipient of this year's Griffin Scott Pherson Memorial Educational Scholarship for his work with special needs athletes. Coach Porter works as a Special Olympics powerlifting coach, and Big Dog Barbell is a way to provide equipment, uniforms, and travel at little to no cost to the families. Coach Porter is also a competitive powerlifter and holds 7 world records in the IPL USPA. Porter has a bachelor's degree in health and physical education from the Citadel and has a master's degree in special education from Valdosta State University. So welcome to the show, Coach.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited about talking about what my athletes can do.
You know, we met down in Texas. I happened to be sitting at a Georgia table. I was talking to Tucker C, and then the table filled up around me with Georgia coaches. So you happened to be there, and we had a great conversation, and I think it'll make for a great podcast.
Yeah, I agree. So I always like to talk about what my athletes can do, and the ways that I train them, and relate it back to and learn from coaches that, that coach typical kids, and I think we can all learn and share and gain knowledge from each other. And I look forward to having this conversation.
Adapting PE for all students and the challenges that poses. So, I mean, I know just your typical everyday kid, you don't get all of them to buy into PE. Now you take that and you move that into athletes and students that can't participate in PE for certain reasons, or maybe perceived certain reasons, but you've kind of broken down that barrier. How difficult has that been to get buy-in and then start building a curriculum?
So I started off as a gen ed PE teacher and taught weight training, and you'd have good kids in there, and then you'd have your kids that were probably put in there by their counselors and shouldn't have been in there and didn't want to be there. And then when I started doing adapted PE, and it's the best part of the day for most of those kids. Like, they get to go to PE when they come with me. So that's what I love the most about teaching adapted PE. It's not like an everyday kind of general ed PE where you get kids in there that don't necessarily want to be in a PE class. For the most part, all my kids really want to be in PE. Now, there are days where I don't have full participation from everybody, and that's just any teacher anywhere. But yeah, I have developed a program that I adapt the weight room to my kids. So from, I have world champion powerlifters and all the way down to students where I'm helping them and putting hand over hand on the bar with them and helping them move the bar, or helping them do curls, and they're doing lightweight curls, or we're using bands to do our curls. So I try to adapt the weight training curriculum to my students, because it's I love lifting weights. Like you said, I compete, and I love my weight training journey, and so I like to try to impart that and get kids strong and come up with ways to do it. So all of my adapted PE students strength train in some way. Like I said, all the way from a 2-time world champion all the way down to, kids that are just in there to move 2-pound dumbbells, but they're still strength training.
Through your work with this, I'm sure if another coach was to look at it, there has to be definitely something they could take away for injured athletes or things like that, because you've changed the curriculum so much to adapt to your students that there is a way if another athlete is injured or something like that. It's just a matter of studying it out and finding out what'll help.
Yeah. And that comes back to knowing your athletes and knowing what they can and cannot do, and how I can help them get that way, or get better. So like you were saying, as far as, you got injuries, you got different things that I have to work around to help an athlete, help one of my students weight train. And I have a couple of my students have cerebral palsy, but they absolutely love, those two are the two that love to be in the weight room the most. They find out that it's Tuesday or Thursday, it's their day to go to the weight room. Adrian and Maddie are so excited. So we work around their grip and mobility issues and help them move weight and help them lift weights. And it ends up being, they're accomplishing something that day. And I'm working around, uh, what their disability is to help them, adapt the curriculum to them. And yeah, it's, that's when you talk about when you get injuries in the from anything is you got to work around those injuries because you can't just stop training. You got to find a way to work around it so that you can keep getting better and keep getting stronger.
Now, the one thing about your curriculum is it's based on each individual athlete because they all have different, things they need or things they're weak at, where in a general pop, maybe you have across the board curriculum.
Right.
Every year you have to go over your curriculum and change it. How tough is that?
That's probably the toughest part about being a special education teacher, whether it's an adapted PE teacher or just a regular special education teacher is, you're adapting your curriculum every year to meet the needs of your students. And what I like to do is I like to write them strength training or, cardio goals in their IEPs that are obtainable for them. And it's something that they can do and they can accomplish every, 6 weeks, every semester. So yeah, I mean, that's the most difficult part of your job as a special ed teacher is adapting that curriculum and writing it for that each individual kid. And making it impactful for them.
Learning that success can come in the tiniest of forms. I'm sure with some of the population you have, you're looking for tiny, tiny changes. How long did that take to accept that is the job and start learning to look for those little victories?
That's a great question because that's probably one of the very beginning when I first started teaching adapted PE, coming from the gen ed side, and kind of being, I was a high school wrestling coach as well, and being a perfectionist about different things. That took a little getting used to, but then when you realize that even the smallest of the victories are monumental for them, it makes it going to work every day a big deal. When a kid can go from doing 0 sit-ups, or I'm pushing him, helping him move his body to do a sit-up, to where they're doing 1 or 2 sit-ups, that's huge. And that makes my job fun. And just because I can have those small victories and do things like that.
Through all this, you've managed to find an outlet for powerlifting and special needs athletes through the Special Olympics. So getting set up with that and starting to take athletes out so the world can see what they're doing. I know I listened to you talk and you said your first Special Olympics, you guys just bombed and you had to go back to the drawing board. So building a program that allows these athletes to go out to really big competitions that mean a lot and show off what they're doing. How much of a process is that to build?
So it's one of those things where I love to go talk to other adapted PE teachers and get them into getting their kids into the weight room. Right. And it has been a long process, a long process. And I want people to understand that because where I'm at now, like you see all these good things and I've got some really strong kids. Right. But when we went, I took 2 kids to the very first Special Olympics meet that I could take them to, and we totally bombed. And then before that, we just walked into the weight room one day because it was open and I had the kids and I was looking for something to do, trying to figure out how to be an adapted PE teacher. And I was like, why can't I take my kids into the weight room? And I said, you know what? We're going to go in there. Everybody likes to do curls. We grabbed like 5-pound dumbbells, 10-pound dumbbells, and we just started doing curls. We laid down on the bench press because, everybody can lay down on the bench press and do an empty bar. The school that I'm at, it was pretty fortunate to have some really good gear. We had some training bars, the 15-pound bars. So just about all my kids could move that. And I was like, man, we're going to start doing this more often. So then I built in to that was a year and a half. And then we started, I was like, let's take them to the Special Olympics. I had never competed in powerlifting by that point. I'd been coaching wrestling and wrestled and played rugby and stuff like that and never powerlifted. And I was like, well, how hard could it be? Little did I know. And we went to the meet and I thought I read the rules and how to do everything, but it's different when you do something, when you actually go to compete at somewhere, it's way different. And I was like, man, this was really fun. And these kids can do this. So I was like, hey, we're going to figure this out. That was 2018. So we start to get a little bit more into it, 2019. And then 2020, we were going to do another meet. And then, of course, that was in March. And where all that went. So everything kind of got delayed. But at that point, 2019, I had been so interested in it. And, we got some weather moving in right now. So if you lose me, it's because of the weather. Good old summer thunderstorm. So I started powerlifting 2019 and did my first meet. And I was like, okay, this is something I really like to do. And I really wanted to get the kids involved in it and help them. And then 2019-20 happens. I stepped down from coaching wrestling and go full-time adapted PE. And that's where I really wanted to start getting a Special Olympics powerlifting program going. The gym I train at is Roswell Barbell. The owner, his name is Callahan. Great guy. He loves training athletes. And he was like, hey, bring the kids here. He doesn't charge them to train there because I don't take money to train the kids. He's like, just bring them. So I took them to the gym. We were going there on Friday afternoons where it was a little less busy. And we started going there every Friday. And we did our first APF meet in 21. Which is the American Powerlifting Federation. We did the Amateur American Powerlifting Federation, the APF Nationals that were in Gatlinburg. So this was the second meet that I was taking kids to. I took 4. My in-laws live about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Gatlinburg. So we stayed overnight with them, had a big spaghetti dinner the night before, got up early, drove to Gatlinburg and competed, and the kids did awesome. And I can't say enough about the APF. They are one of the oldest powerlifting federations in the United States, and they have really embraced having a Special Olympics division. And they are very inclusive. And so I took 4 kids that year in 21, took 5 kids in 22 doing the same thing. It was in Gatlinburg. And in that year, 22 was when my first lifter, Dave, he is the one, Dave's a young man with Down syndrome that's just really embraced powerlifting. He has found his thing. It is his thing. He loves to do it. He qualified for the AWPC World Championships that were being held in Manchester, England. And his parents wanted him to go because he was supposed to schedule to have heart surgery in 22. Kids with Down syndrome have some heart issues, and they just need to go in and close a small hole in his heart. Nothing that was affecting him lifting or anything. It wasn't going to really affect him until he was in his 30s or 40s, but they wanted to go ahead and, get it done while he was still a pediatric. And so his parents were like, hey, we really want to take him to the World Championships that they're having. And because he has to have heart surgery. You never know what comes out of heart surgery. And I said, all right, let's do it. And so we raised money through GoFundMe to help pay for Dave, his mom and grandmother, and me to go over to England. And we raised, a good chunk of money, but people couldn't write it off in taxes. And, GoFundMe took their cut. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And so that's the whole idea behind Big Dog Barbell. And the really cool thing about Roswell Barbell and where we train is the gym and the gym community has just embraced my kids. They absolutely love them being a part of the gym. and the Hilbert law firm was like, "Hey, we're going to help you incorporate." So they filed all the paperwork and helped me do all that. My dad's a CPA. He helped me file all the stuff for the IRS. And boom, we had a public charity 501c3 and Big Dog Barbell. And that way now people can write it off in taxes and donate. And my goal with that is to be able to pay for the kids to go over. You know, we live in I live Roswell, Alpharetta area that we live in Milton, where most of the kids go to school that I teach, is a pretty well off area, but it doesn't have really anything to do with that. You know, I just, you know, these parents have done so much for their kids and want their kids to be included in on things. And I want to help, and I want to help kids train, and get them to go to places. So, you know, Dave went over there. When Dave went over to compete, they didn't have a division of Special Olympics at the World Championships. So he just competed against other 18 and 19-year-olds and won. He's a small little guy, so he was only at 52 kilos then, so that was 114 pounds. And so he set world records in just the typical division, and they gave him the world records for the Special Olympics division, and he just keeps getting stronger. So he did end up having the heart surgery, but he didn't have it until the next year. But he's responded very well. And like I said, so I got Big Dog Barbell, and you know, we raise money, and I'm taking 5 kids to the AWPC World Championships that are in Limerick, Ireland, and they compete on August the 26th. Big Dog Barbell gave each one of the families $3,000 to use towards the trip to pay for the plane, hotel, and you know, hopefully a little bit of one of the parents' plane tickets. So we're going. We're so excited to go from taking 1 kid 2 years ago to now taking 5. You know, and I have 14 lifters that I train now with Big Dog Barbell, and hopefully in 2 more years we take all 14 of them, and I pay a good chunk of that.
Talking about Dave and some of your other powerlifters, the desire to compete, do they have that same fire as the normal kid you'd run into on the street? Do they understand, like, they're doing something, they're playing a sport, this is their thing?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it get pretty intense in there?
Oh yeah. So they Dave, it gets pretty intense. I have another kid named Taylor that gets pretty intense when he trains. You know, our trainings are intense and they're funny and all kind of wrapped up in the same time. And it kind of depends on the kids. I have some of my kids, one of my kids, Aaron, who I've had Aaron for 6 or 7 years. Aaron is a primetime performer. He's not a big time. He's not big time into training. He trains, and he trains hard because I make him train hard. But when the lights come on and he gets on the platform and he yells, "Let's go," like, he is going to, whatever he's going to do, he's going to do it out there, because it's just, he loves the aspect of competing. My kids absolutely love to be in front of an audience and show off for an audience. And they'll do more weight at the gym just because they've got people cheering for them. So they very rarely do they get, every now and then they'll get a little nervous, but for the most part, they actually rise to the occasion. But Dave and a couple of the other ones, Dave, Taylor, they really like to train, and really look forward to training. That's one thing that I've taken from my kids is they don't begrudgingly train. They live to go to the gym. So like, that helps my attitude when I'm training. But you know, my kids love to train. You know what? I'm going to love to train because it's fun. We have the opportunity to do it. Not everyone does.
I had a question in there on that. You know, I know you can take athletes to a big environment, new sounds, new lights, new people they don't know, how people are perceiving their performance. It really affects them. So I wasn't sure with the athlete you're dealing with how much that would bother them, good or bad, but it sounds like your athletes thrive on this.
So they absolutely thrive on it. After they've done one competition, they usually just love it. The first competition, they're a little nervous and a little for each individual kid a little nervous. So it's usually the first and second one. But once they've gotten those first and second ones over, they just thrive on there being an audience for them. And they love to flex and they love to, hit a big lift and celebrate it. And that we have a photographer that's done a bunch of the APF meets that really captures the kids and when they're celebrating, and um, they absolutely love it. So the first meet, they're going to be a little nervous like anybody. Once they settle down, they're going to settle down. There's some that I really hype up before their lifts, and then like any other coach, there's others I don't hype them up. Hey, let's breathe, let's slow it down, let's approach the bar, and we're going to be good. But the other ones, I'm like, let's go, baby, come on, hey, how big you want to be today? And they respond to that. So it's just like coaching any athlete. You got to know your athlete. You got to know who you can hype up, and you got to know who you have to help calm down.
The challenges of plateaus, they exist in every gym in the nation. Your gym's no exception. So how do you help these athletes overcome some of the mental sticking points, physical sticking points? What's some stuff that you've done to really help that?
So, one, you and I had a great conversation at NatCon about using some reverse bands. I'm glad we had that conversation. I don't know when I would have thought about it. I would have eventually come to hey, this is something we need to do. But after talking with you, I was like, I don't know why I hadn't been thinking about that. So actually, Dave has kind of hit a sticking point. He's got a 250. I'd have to go look at Oprah Powerlifting. I can't remember if his squat is 248, but he's got a sticking point right at 250, where him handling that amount of weight just is his little bugaboo right now, and it's got him. So what I'm doing this training cycle, and we just started it this past week, we're doing our weight for this week, and I think his weight that he was squatting this past Saturday for some singles, because we've already hit the single, and that's one thing with the Special Olympians. We've got to practice our skill, and our skill is the lift, right? So we've got to do a lot of game time reps. So we do a lot of singles as we build in, and we go through all the powerlifting commands, as that could be one of the most difficult things for a typical lifter, is to follow the powerlifting commands when you're in that heat of that competition, right? So we're in our singles thing, and he hit a really nice clean 230-pound squat for his first single. And then when he went to go hit the second one, it slowed down. So I said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and put the reverse band on it. He's going to hit that one. And then we're going to do next week's weight with the reverse band, so that he feels it going down, and then he pops out of the bottom with it, right? And he feels confident in it. So I'm really hoping, and we did that with Taylor too. Taylor hit his, I think he was scheduled for 235 this past Saturday. He hit his singles great. So we put 245 on the bar for him, which is going to be next week's weight with the reverse bands, and he nailed it. So I'm hoping that bleeds into next week to where they've already felt that weight, and they're ready to go. And I'm really hoping that that's going to help Dave get over that 250 hump, because it's not a strength issue. It's that weight on that bar on his back has him spooked right now. And that happens to everybody. Not just not your Special Olympic lifter. I mean, that happens to any lifter. You get to a weight and you're like, huh, for me, it was, trying to get my 800-pound squat. I should have had it, a 2 meets before when I finally got it. So it's finding something, sticking with it, and really working and trying some new things. So I'm really hoping that this reverse band idea and using the reverse bands helps us get him up, because he really should be squatting in the 260s, 265. So, I mean, he's pulling close to 300. And for me, your squat should carry your deadlift. It shouldn't be the other way around. So we really just got to get him over this. So, but yeah, that's, it's just trying to find new things and stuff that's going to help. Video, showing them video. I had a lot of success doing a deadlift program this spring with them that I was doing because I'm actually working on my specialist degree. And I was doing a QMD project, quantitative movement but diagnosis. And we did it on their deadlifts. And I was showing them videos of people doing really good deadlifts, talking them through their deadlifts, having them pull it, recording them and showing them. And, Dave ended up, because he had a little bit of a sticking point at 286 on the deadlift. And this spring going into nationals down in Baton Rouge, he pulled that 290, 292 or 293, which obviously showing him the videos and really watching what he was doing incorrectly a little bit, or just where he could make a little bit of changes, really helped. So that's, one thing is videos, and they all like to see their, kids love the Instagram, and most of my kids have Instagram as well. So they love seeing their lifts and seeing other people lift.
Going back to the lighten method that you just talked about, that whole conversation was a great conversation, but how we got down that road was we had talked through some other ways, knee wraps, briefs,
Yep.
and what you were kind of mentioning to me. And I don't know that this is just your athletes, because I could put some knee wraps on some kids out here and they'll freak out. Is some of that stuff's just a little bit too much for where they're at. Knee wraps and the confinement of all of that is just too much. That's where we come with the lighten method.
Yep. Yeah. And, Dave likes his wrist wraps tight. So eventually I think I'm going to be able to put him into maybe wrap his knees as well, or put him into some briefs. He's going to have to learn how that's going to bite and certain, or on your thighs, and it's not going to be very comfortable. But then I have some kids that don't even like to wear the wrist wraps and don't want. I mean, they're really just raw lifters where it's just no wrist wraps. Aaron doesn't like to wear wrist wraps, and he only likes to wear his belt on squats. That's something where, some of the pressure of the equipment is, I don't think my kids would really deal well with that. And it would just be a little bit too much. They enjoy lifting. They don't want it to be painful. Whereas I'm a equip lifter. If it's not painful, then it's probably not going to help me.
Well, that conversation spun into some off conversations you and I had, and you had broken it down to the color of the plates. They get to where they memorize the color of the plates, and to get them past plateaus, you have to mix that up.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Cause that's, you know what? And, we trained today in a Miri who had the biggest issue going on the kilo plates to the blue plate, the 20 kg. He recognized that plate. So when we were at training, he knew when I threw that blue 20 kg plate on there, that bar was going to be heavy. So it wasn't that I tricked him, and I kind of did trick him, but all I did was I put the 15 on there, which is the yellow plate, and then put the 5 kg on the outside. So it was still the 20 kg, but all he saw was the yellow plate and was like, huh, and just squatted back down. Now today I just threw the blue plate on there, and it didn't bother him. He squatted it beautifully, because it's just one of those things. We got over that little scary of that blue plate is heavy, to where, you know what, it's supposed to be heavy. That's okay. And that's another thing I talked to them about. I said, hey, listen, I'm never going to put you in a position where you can't do something. If I don't think that you can do it, I'm not going to put you in that position. So whatever I put on the bar, I really think that you can do it. Now, it might be heavy and it might feel heavy, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just, we've got to push through that right there. And that's something that any coach has to talk about with their kids. Just because something's heavy doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just, you got to dig down a little bit deeper and finish it out. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because That 100% happened today. He went from a yellow plate to a blue plate today in training, and it didn't phase him at all. And so from there, we're going to keep going. Eventually we'll probably get to that same sticking point when he gets to a red plate on the squats. But I'll just throw the the blue plate on and put that 5 on the outside, and he'll be happy.
And there again, you kind of get into what the Lighten method does there too. It builds that confidence. They get used to having that, so you've
Yep.
got a couple different tools in your bag now to overcome that. I had listened to another podcast you had done, the Caffeinated Coaches podcast, I believe, and it had some really good stuff in there. And you started going into it, but you're in the same boat as the rest of us in a sense that you have to build a lot of these lifts from nothing. They don't understand the body movement. They don't understand the hip hinge. They don't understand how to get set down in the squat. Your path might take a little longer. What methods are you using to build these really good mechanics in your athletes?
So, I have on Tuesdays, I have 2 groups, and I have the first group has got Dave, and it's got my kids that are going to Ireland that compete at nationals and do all that stuff. So there's not a lot of in that group. We're at a point where we're just flat out training. Now we're always working technique, right? But we're moving in that group. My second group, it's got 4 kids that have done their first meet, but they all of them just started training last summer. So, and they didn't do their first meet until the spring of this past year. So they went almost a full calendar year before they did their first meet. And I firmly believe that I'm not going to put anyone into a competition until they are ready for it. And I think that their technique is good enough to do a competition. So today at training, those 4 kids, they're doing a back squat. Okay. We're over there back squatting, squatting our monolift. I have 2 brand new kids that started this summer that are in that group as well. So they just started. So those kids, we're starting them out with zombie squats. So they are doing zombie squats, and goblet squats with a kettlebell. The kids are actually pretty strong. I moved them up to a 30, and I think probably next week a 40-pound kettlebell where they just hold it in front of them and they're going to squat to a box. But again, I'm not rushing this. There's no reason to rush these kids and move them on. So they're going to do a lot of zombie squats, and we're working with arms straight out. We're sitting back to a box so that they learn the proper depth. I have a couple of the boxes that are, the 14, 16, 18, where you can rotate them dependent on their height. And we are learning to sit back. So that hip hinge, and sit back to a box, keeping our chest up, our chin level, and our arms straight out in front of us. The next progression for me is going to the goblet squat. I think the goblet squat is great for the kids learning how to keep that chest up, because that kettlebell wants to take them forward and wants to bring them forward. And they've really got to learn that they've got to sit and keep that chest up, and that chin nice and level, and they sit back to the box. And that is the progression. And I'll start putting a bamboo bar on their back once they really feel like they're going to keep their chest up, they're going to keep their chin level. We've got them in a good stance, depending on, how wide their shoulders are. And then, like I said, the next progression will be some kind of bamboo bar on their back. So then now, instead of having their arms out in front of them, they're learning to keep that chest up with the bar on their back. And then we're just going to do those light until I feel like they've got that technique down. And then we'll start maybe doing a sandbar. The bar has a little weight in it, and then a training bar, and then up to a 45-pound power bar, or, we use some of the big old brand new, those sports craft. Because when the kids squat with the APF or the APO, they're using can maybe be anywhere from a 30 kg bar to a 66-pound bar or a 50-pound bar. So kind of depending on where we're at. So, but yeah, we just progress. It's my kind of squat progression. I am sure that I've stole it from somebody else. I can't tell you exactly who I stole it from, but zombie squats to goblet squats to a training bar on their back to squat. I have a presentation that I do to other adapted PE teachers, and the Amiri kid that I was talking about with the blue plates. I have a video of him putting a training bar on his back for the first time and sitting to a box, squatting to a box, and you can see where his body's moving all over the place as he's doing these squats. And I'm like, hey, look, Amiri's a world champion now. Like he squats. You're seeing him squat a 15-pound the training bar for the very first time, and now I have him squatting 150 pounds, and his form is great. It could always work to improve, but he doesn't have the movements where he's not making his core tight, where he's not stabilizing in that's another thing we're teaching. That's another thing that I got from somewhere. And I have the kids put a big medicine ball in their stomach and then trying to teach them how to brace. We breathe in, make our stomachs big, and try to push that medicine ball off our bellies, right? So that's a drill that we do a bunch, and I do it with these younger kids too, to try to teach them how to brace and use their belt to breathe into and brace into their belt. But yeah, those are my progressions. I hope that answered your question.
It did. And to take this a little further, you eventually got to pull the box. So you're trying to teach depth. It's going to be judged. Are you setting in pins where they can go to pins to start feeling it? Are you setting in a chain where they can feel the chain? Or are you just slowly coaching it over time? You need to be deeper. You need to be deeper. How does that look?
We had that conversation in NatCon. That's something I wanted to start doing. I haven't figured that out yet exactly as putting like a string. I know some coaches put a string across the rack or something like that. Really, when I remove the box, we just try to inch them down. Most of the time that muscle memory from the box really helps out with them. And I don't have too many depth issues. I do have sometimes too deep of a squat issues. Dave had an issue where I actually had to bring the box back because I had to stop him from going too far down. Because he would bury himself down there. And so I don't have too many of the depth issues of not getting deep enough. Usually most of the time I tell the kids, hey, we just got to get a little deeper, and they work deeper. Most of the time they haven't. If they're not getting deep enough, it's more, I think, of a form issue somewhere else, and that we need to go back to just doing some goblet squats and really work on that form. Aaron should have had my first 300-pound squat at nationals this past in June. He squatted it beautifully, but he did cut it. And I was like, oh, and he had no reason to cut it because he came down and went up so fast. And I think he just kind of surprised himself with how fast he went each way. He just didn't sit down that last, inch or two. But I have noticed with him, as the weight gets a little heavier, he does tend to cut. And everybody kind of does that. The weight starts getting heavier, you tend to cut. I tend to put him back to the box, and when they do that in that situation, let's get back to the box. Let's reestablish our depth, because there's no reason for you to cut it. So, I'm a big believer in the box squats. So,
and I am too. And I've thought about this a lot since our conversation down there. Like, how can you make it fun and different things like that? I almost wonder if like a bell on a string, and then when they can hear the bell, like a sleigh bell or whatever, when it hits the ground, the bell rings.
Yeah.
And then, because what I'm worried about in the discussion we had is if you use chains or pins, kind of like Dave Hoff used chains, I'm afraid they'll come out from underneath the weight at the bottom.
Right.
And then the pin carries the weight, or the chain carries the weight, and then you lose what you're trying to get. So, man, I thought about this a lot since our conversation, but I thought about something like that, something to make it fun, where when you do hit depth, there's audible noise or some sort of stimulus that says, hey, I'm there, and then come out of it.
That's actually a really good thing to explore because that just that the adapted PE side of me is like, because it's maybe because if they hit it as well or they feel it and hear it, you've got both the touch and the auditory of, hey, yeah, that's actually really, that is really cool. That's something I will keep playing around with. So thank you.
I don't know. It's just it was a great conversation we had, and then it sends you back where you start thinking about, even though you're dealing with adaptive, I'm dealing with kids that really struggle with some of that, whether that be mobility, whether that be they're just cutting it because they're scared. All of that works. It works. A bell would
Yep.
work just as good for your everyday average lifter as it would for an adaptive PE, I think. But I haven't.
No, I agree with you because there's,
So
we with this crew that I spot with on Saturdays, one of my training partners is having an issue of he's plenty strong, but he's cutting them right. So what could be something to help him? Because we keep telling him, you tell someone that they're blue in their face, but maybe an auditory, um, you know, something where he finally hits depth and he feels it, and like you said, there's some kind of auditory signal, and that helps him. So yeah,
using something that's audible in a gym isn't that much different than a meet because you can call a kid's depth as the coach. You can tell him when he's there or she when they're there and get them out of that squat. So, it does kind of work.
yeah. No, I call all my kids, and again, this comes back to knowing your athletes too. There's some of the kids that I have to yell up to, Dave kind of in particular, before he even hits depth because he doesn't process it until he hits depth to come up. So I'm actually, and sometimes I even tell the judges, I'm going to be, hey, look, I'm going to call up before he gets there because his processing is a little slower than some of ours. So, and plus he's under strain too, right? He's got 240 something pounds on his back. I'm going to call him up. Don't look to where he actually comes up at because I'll give him a little call early, but he's got to process it. So yeah, I call all my kids. I give them an up command when they've hit the depth that they need to hit.
Now let's go from the squat to the deadlift because you got some big pullers.
Okay.
So to to keep that from being a two-part lift, to get that safe, to get that where you feel good about it, do you teach them off of a chair or a box? Do you teach them sumo? How do you build that?
So I again, I'll teach them sumo or conventional, and it is going to be based upon the kid and what I think is going to help them be successful. One of my kids, George, uh, he was one of the quickest kids and he's getting really up there too. He's going to be eventually chasing down a 300-pound deadlift in the pretty near future. But we just switched him to sumo. He did his whole first year pulling conventional, and then this past spring he went to go compete at an APO meet in May. And for that training cycle and through the project I was doing for my specialist degree, I switched him to sumo, just because there was some knee cave in his conventional that I wasn't happy with, and he's actually very flexible. Kids with Down syndrome are extremely flexible, and scooting him out to sumo took some of the pressure off that knee cave because he's stronger and more flexible in the hips. Um, so again, this comes down to every coach needs to know their lifters, their athletes, where they're going to be most successful, and you put them in the most successful position, or they're put them in the spot that's going to make them the most successful. So, but yes, to answer your question, I will start the kids kind of the same way with we're going to sit on a box, and we're going to get a kettlebell in front of us and just hold on to the kettlebell. It can be one or two kettlebells, and we're just going to learn to stand up from sitting down. Because I mean, really, that's kind of that position. Now, I do set the box higher, um, because that's the deadlift is definitely, you don't want to squat a deadlift. So, we biomechanically, we make sure that their hips are a little bit higher than they would be for the squat. But that's where we're going to start, is we're going to sit to that box. We're going to sit on it. We're going to come down. We're going to grab onto a kettlebell, and we're going to just learn to stand up with it. I think doing that way either transitions to sumo or conventional, kind of depending on how the kid is. And then it's the next kind of hardest thing is when you actually start pulling with the bar from the floor, is getting them to pull that bar into their shins and up their legs. I mean, that's tough for anybody. Nobody likes to grind a bar up their legs, but in order to not have that pressure on your back, that's where it's got to go. None of my kids are perfect in that. They're getting better at it. But that's I think the next hardest thing is to keep the bar on their legs as it comes up. So pull it in and up and grind it and drag it up their body. So if you have any ideas on that, I'm all ears. So
You're doing what I would do. I get a lot of kids in here that have never deadlifted before in their life, or they've developed some bad habits, and I almost always go to a box first, and then I try to get them to shoot the hips straight off the box. Mm-hmm. And once they feel comfortable there, then I'll usually go to a sumo, because I'm working with athletes, and I think the sumo carries over better to stopping and all the eccentric forces they're going to come against. So while we might do some conventional, a lot of ours is sumo, and that's just how I develop it, and it works. But the kids I'm working with, it might be a little bit easier to communicate some of those ideas with.
Right. The trap bar, I really think puts kids into a position to learn how to deadlift as well, because it forces them to be, with their arms out to the side and be more of a neutral kind of situation. And it kind of naturally puts them in a pretty good position to where they have that chest up and they get that kind of that natural curve in their body. I'm never going to start a kid with a trap bar, but with my experienced lifters, we'll do like a 2 or 3 week kind of cycle where we hit a trap bar instead of just pulling. And really kind of in that way, because you can push their weights up a little bit with that too. And then they start experiencing handling a little bit of heavier weight. I had a little success with one of my kids, Joshua, and he got his 300-pound deadlift in May. But we got him to get a 300-pounder with the trap bar first. And then I'm like, hey, you just pulled 300 with that trap bar. You can do it with with your conventional. He's a conventional puller. And he did it. So, it's changing things up. It's giving them different stimulus to help them kind of break through those plateaus, like you said. So that's another one I just thought about, because Joshua did have a 300-pound pull. He probably should have had it before that, but we got him to do it with the trap bar first. And now he's, he trains in that area. So,
and yeah, you got to get him to believe. I know out here we'll stack some mats, not a ton of mats, but we'll stack some mats and let them build some confidence with a little bit more height, so the hips come in a little quicker. The next cycle we may go to a deficit, and I don't want to demoralize them, but trying to keep that balance. But yeah, pin pulls and block deadlifts seem to help their confidence quite a bit.
Yeah. The gym, we have wagon wheels. So I love the wagon wheels, and we come out of a competition with the experienced kids. We go to wagon wheel pulls for a cycle right after that, because one, you can get a little heavier, but you don't have to lean all the way down to pick it up. So yeah, the block pulls, the wagon wheels, those are good kind of changes of the stimulus and giving them confidence. So I mean, shoot, I can pull more with the wagon wheel, so that gives me more confidence.
We lifted a NASA meet this last fall, and it really come about a little bit by accident, but we found out we could put the deadlift on a 4-inch block because they used 100-pound plates.
Okay.
And I used it for a confidence builder to begin with. But then I started figuring the math on what the plate size was, and then I started telling them, I'm like, look, whatever you pull here, you're going to pull at the meet. There's not that much height difference. We're only talking, an inch and a half, 2 inches. And I got that in their head. And I'll tell you what, man, every one of those kids pulled exactly what they pulled on that 4-inch block,
Yeah, that's awesome.
But in all of this, eventually the rubber has to meet the road, and you've got to turn them out in the world and let them do their thing. Being comfortable letting them kind of fly, that is tough, no matter what athlete you're coaching, but let alone, special needs athletes. When do you decide it's time for them to, kind of feel that and almost, I'm not going to say kick them out of the nest, but you're kind of getting there where you have to. When do you know they're ready for that?
As far as ready for, like, we're just going to go kind of like balls to the wall and see what they can do that day. Is it that kind of what you mean?
No, not necessarily, but eventually they have to free squat. And in a competition, you're not able to get your hands on them. You're not able to, you got to step back and you got to kind of be a spectator / coach. When do you decide that point you've reached that point?
That's a great question. Like I said, I tend to like to train my kids for a year, doing box squats, doing, pulls off a box as well, and bench press, just so that they can grasp and understand how their bodies work. So we get to that year point. Then I'm looking, all right, we can start looking to put you in a competition. It might not go well, and that's okay, because it could be the kids still just don't understand how it all works, how their body works. And then, like I said, sometimes they get nervous at their first meet. But I usually get a pretty good feeling within the first 6 months of training the kid when they're going to be ready. And that year time frame, I think, is pretty good. I think I've got it down to where you give me a year with them, they're pretty close to it, and I'm ready to go. My one kid, George, that we were talking about, the one that I just switched to sumo, his first year, we went to APF Nationals in Chicago. That was 23. So the 22-23 school year was the first year I got him. He's the first kid that I competed with in the first semester. So usually we do the Special Olympics, the Southeast Special Olympics during our winter games in January. So he started with me in August, and I actually competed him because he picked it up really quick. So that was a kid that within that first semester of me being his teacher, I was like, you know what? We're going to put him out there. Let's do it. Let's see how he does. And he did great. And then I said, hey, you know what? I'm pretty sure I can get him into the AAPF Nationals in Chicago. Do y'all want to go with us? And they were like, yeah, let's go. And he did awesome and loved it. And then went to the World Championships in Baton Rouge that last August of 23. So like he's been one of the only kids that I've within a semester said, yeah, let's go ahead and compete. He's ready to go. Everybody else, it's because the first thing for me is the safety of the kid and the safety of the lifter. And so again, like I said, I'm never going to put a kid in a position that I don't think he's going to be successful. So I think I have that year time frame pretty mapped out. But yeah, once they hit that, and I think they're ready, let's go do a contest. So.
And that's where they're going to learn the most. Then that's where everything pays off, right? That's where they get to show off and show everybody how hard they've been working.
Yeah. And, and I came from a wrestling background, and in wrestling, you learn how to wrestle by actually wrestling. So, you could practice all you want, but you actually got to, like you said, toe the line and step on the platform. You might as well and go do it. And let's see what you got. And then we'll video it. We'll look at it. We'll watch it, and we'll make improvements. And, because you never know what you're going to get taking a kid to your first meet. And I had one kid, his name is Jake, and Jake is awesome. And I took him to he did his first meet in May, and he got his first squat. And as soon as he got that squat, he was like, he dropped a big old F-bomb going, yeah. And I was like, whoa, no, we can't. We can't cuss on the platform. And all the judges who coach and train Special Olympians as well, they were laughing because they're like, Coach, what are you teaching these kids? And I said, no, I didn't do that.
You know, you hit on something there, and it's one thing I noticed. One of the best thing I did was took a group of kids to a powerlifting. It's amazing when you come back what they change on their own. Me and you can tell them box height all the time. You know, you're too high.
Right. Yeah.
They go to a meet and they realize that you're not lying to them. And I come back, the box height's a little bit lower. You know, they moved into a lot more safety bar squats because they think that'll boost their squat, which I think it will too. The dynamic work we were doing changed. They're like, hey, what if we adjust this? What if we do this? Well, now all of a sudden you're having a conversation because they're understanding what you've been trying to get them to do. And you open up this whole new level of dialogue just because they've experienced. Now the questions start flowing a little bit more. And yeah, sometimes competing is the best thing you can do.
Yeah. And it helps them figure things out. You know, and the following the commands is because you can tell them, hey, you have to follow the commands to you're blue in the face. And they're like, okay. And they mostly do it in training. And then they go to a contest and a comp and do a beautiful squat, but didn't follow one command. And they're like, and they look over and they look and they say 3 red lights. And they're like, and I was like, because you didn't follow the commands. And we've been talking about that. And then, and Aaron, our first nationals, had this beautiful squat. But he didn't even wait for any commands, just blew right through it. But I tell you what, like, he understood it. And I think he's only missed one other command at a competition since then. Because he experienced it at a competition, and you know what? It sucked to actually hit the squat, but you still get 3 red lights. My kids hate getting red lights. So
you're talking about the kid that dropped the F-bomb on the platform. That did remind me, we were at a powerlifting meet, and one of my guys, he pulled a big deadlift. I want to say he pulled 500, you know, and he got it down. He come off there and he's like, let's effing go. And I'm like, they let it slide, but I got him in the back, and then he decided he wanted to pull a state record. So I'm like, listen, dude, I know you're excited. I know you get overwhelmed and you say some stuff you shouldn't, but if you pull this 520 and you drop the F-bomb and they red light you on that, that's on you. There's no reason to, I know you're excited, but there's no reason to do that. So we had a little talk. He understood. He's like, I didn't even think about it, man. And I'm like, no, it's okay. You're human, but
right.
You could be excited. Just don't bomb out on a lift because you said a bad word, So he cleaned it up and it all went well. But sometimes you just got to put things in perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's great. Because I mean, again, my kids are just like typical lifters, and they let things slip and slide. And Dave did that at one year at nationals. He picked up a big deadlift, and instead of falling it to the ground, he just kind of like dropped it from his knees. And I was like, no. And he had never done that, but he had just gotten so excited. Right. And like you said, he's human. He just made a little mistake, and the judge went and talked to him about it. And he was like, okay. And then he got it the next one too. So it was fine, but it was, this is part of the competition and growing up and competing. You learn lessons.
Now, anybody that's not done it may not understand it, but prep is grueling. That's the worst part of it all. You're starting to get in, you're starting to take some really heavy stuff, and you're starting to get sore. You're starting to get beat up. I mean, the idea is to super compensate the CNS. So you're taking it well past where it's used to going. I would imagine you're peaking your athletes just like everybody else peaks theirs. So you're taking them to a point that's really demanding. How do they handle that?
They get tired for sure. And some of them handle it much better than others do. And although it's funny though, because as we're doing our peaking and they actually, my kids hate like anyone hates doing reps. So like they actually kind of get more excited. Like today we started hitting our part of our peaking and phasing where we're hitting singles. Cause I'm like, all right, all you got to do is a single this time. They're like, yes, single. I don't have to do it 3 or 4 times. No, just a single. So that helps a little bit. And that's one of the things that I on the main lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift. I typically never take my kids past 5 reps. Um, we'll do some drop sets and do, to see how many we can get. But I'm not going to program anything really over 5 reps on the main lifts. Now, when we do auxiliaries, we'll do tens, 8s, 10s, and 12s. They handle that much better, but I don't get as much out of them if I have them do more than 5 reps. So, and for deadlifts, I don't believe in, especially for myself, but even the kids that I coach, taking them more than 2 or 3 reps at a time, because I really feel like the form breaks down for anybody, especially on deadlifts. After several reps. So we will do 2s and 3s. We'll do doubles and triples. But we're gonna stick in that doubles range when we're training just our deadlifts. That's just a personal thing with me and what I believe with my kids. Rein me in here. We were talking about them getting excited. So yeah, so they get excited about singles, but when they realize those singles are max effort, heavy things, they'll drag a little bit. Then it's just me being a good coach and trying to keep them motivated with it. Be like, hey, we've only got two sets of these today. We're good. Hey, you want to be a world champ? You want to be world champ again? And finding those motivational cues to keep them going. And I think that's one of the biggest aspects of coaching, that we've got to remember, and that's for any kid, a typical kid or a kid with a disability, is finding those motivational cues that help them internalize what they need to do and understand that, hey, it's gonna suck, but I can do it because the end goal is I want to be a world champion again. I want to be a national champion again. I want to get another world record. I want to get another national record. So that's, for me, that comes down to the coaching aspect of let's keep them motivated. And I not to toot my own horn, I think I do a pretty good job of tapping into what my kids can do by keeping them motivated. And it's just those little catchphrases like how big you want to be today. Like that's one thing I say. As I say to myself before my big lifts, how big today? And they'll answer me. They're like, I want to be world champ again. Or they say, I want to be big. Like I don't care as long as they're excited. But that's how I feel like I help them the most is just try to keep them motivated.
So let's take that a little further and let's take that into the taper. So you hit your circa max phase, you've got them peaked, you're starting to dial the weight back down. All of a sudden, 70% feels incredibly heavy because the CNS is shot. 50% feels incredibly heavy because the CNS is shot. Well, you start doubting what you can lift. As a lifter, I'm sure you've been there. I know I've been there where you're like, holy cow, this shouldn't feel this heavy, but it's part of the process. So you've got to keep their confidence up when what used to be really light all of a sudden feels incredibly heavy. Does that register in them and they take a little step back and you really have to keep them up for that taper?
Yeah. Kind of, and I'll be really honest with you on this one. It kind of works differently with the kids that I coach, as far as, because they, like I said, I have to change colors on plates So if they know that the weight is going to be lighter, like it doesn't bother them if it feels like if I can just tell them, hey, this is lighter weight today, you're good. They really take that in, and it doesn't bother them. That's honestly something I don't really have to deal with that much. Now we have bad days where they just something doesn't click and doesn't work. And that's okay. We'll just back off totally then. If they're having a bad day and I see that something is wrong and that something looks extremely heavy and it shouldn't be heavy, I'll give them a little chit chat, find out what's wrong, and then you know what? We might not do that next rep or that next set. Um, and that's okay. That's something it's taken me a little bit of time to develop. But sometimes with my kids, less is more. And maybe skipping something is not that bad of an idea. So,
And that's a good point, and that's something I've tried to get way better at out here because the kids are under an enormous amount of stress with their weights at school, their conditioning at school, their sport at school, on top of other things that happen at school. So if they're having a
sure.
bad day out here, it's really dropped importance in my eyes. You know, hey, a good day's coming. Let's just dial her back. Let's get you feeling good
Right.
and send you on your way. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do. And then other times you have guys that are just being a little whiny and you're like, okay, you need to pick it up. But there again, you got to know,
You gotta know your kid.
yeah, you got to know the real ones from the ones just trying to get out of some work. So
Right.
the one thing I did have a question on, and I was prepping all this, I was thinking about it. You know, it's hard enough for your average lifter to go on the road, lift, compete, and deal with the food challenges and the diet that go into that. Now, as special needs athletes, some of them dietary restrictions really affect them. How much planning has to go into, or the parents take care of all this, the food they're going to be eating, what restaurants you might be hitting? How does that all pan out?
So, and that's a great question. And I'm really lucky in that their parents are with me on most of these trips. If they're not, if they're not with me, it's because like Dave, I know what Dave can and cannot eat. So, Amiri is on a little bit of a restrictive diet. So but his parents are usually always with us. So they take care of what he can and cannot eat. But that is a real thing though, because I've had to dial Dave's diet in a bunch of times because like he's real funny. Like he'll eat a lunch that has maybe too much sodium in it, and because he's small, he's under 120 pounds. Like he eats something that's got a lot of sodium. He eats a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, like that, his belly blows up, and like I can't get him back into his belt. So we've had lots of conversations where, hey, we don't need to be eating the fried chicken sandwich. We just need to eat the grilled chicken sandwich. Um, and no French fries. Let's get some fruit. So it's Ireland is going to be interesting. When I took Dave to England, we did a pretty good job over there with England. He his grandma was with us, and they had some other family there. They're from Kenya. His family's originally from Kenya, and they had some Kenyan the community that were there and cooked us a bunch of wonderful Kenyan food that was actually really pretty healthy. Um, so, but yeah, it's just I think something that all coaches have to do is educate their athletes and their athletes' parents about what they can and cannot eat. Um, we need some good carbohydrates in the morning of the competition. We need some eggs. We need some bagels. A little bit of cream cheese. But just educating them on what they can and cannot eat. Let's not get the fast foods. Let's get stuff that's easily digestible um, and it's going to help us perform on the platform. But yeah, their families are with me on most of our trips and ask me what they should be eating, and I'll tell them, let's get some good veggies, let's get the bagels, Sometimes the donut's not too bad as far as, a little bit of quick energy rush. It's something that, is not going to sit hard on their stomach. Um, but yeah, that's sometimes that can be hard. There's a couple times that Dave, we did some of our first competitions, and we get to deadlifts and I couldn't latch his belt. Like we got it down, but we couldn't latch it down because his belly had blown up. So there's been a lot of trial by error. One of those questions you asked me at the beginning is, how did I get this program going? We've been going, tried it 2020. So we're coming into we're in year 4 and stuff. And it's been a lot of trial and error. But I think that's any program, any good coach is, makes mistakes and learns from them. And, hey, let's do it better next time. No more French fries, please.
I have 1,000 more questions, but in an effort to keep everything kind of brief and give you a little bit of an evening, I might end on this one then. These are becoming elite athletes. They're elite at what they do. But their parents don't always understand that. That's their baby. Their baby has special needs. They've always learned to take care of, protect, just like any parent would, only maybe even more so, maybe a hyper almost protectiveness. How hard has it been to deal with some of these trials and keep parents on board when things aren't going exactly as planned?
Yeah, because I've had some questions about, kids, we underperform sometimes or don't do exactly what we're trying to do. And the parents come and ask me the questions and, we'll miss a bench press. And I said, hey, look, sometimes I got to start them lower than I want to on the bench press, just so we make sure we're in the meet, right? Or any lift. Like the lift might not be heavy, but we've got to start it a little lower, and then we make bigger jumps. And sometimes we miss on those bigger jumps. But if we started closer to that bigger jump and we miss that first lift, then we're, our back's against the wall big time there, right? And the parents kind of understand that. So they know that I'm trying to put their kids in a position to be successful at all times. And I'd rather them get a lighter first lift and, be successful at the meet. Maybe they didn't lift as heavy as they could, but they were successful. And then the next meet, we're going to start pushing the envelope on that first lift, My parents of the kids, that my program gives them something to do, and it makes them like they got brothers and sisters that have done sports, and they might not other than maybe some Special Olympic stuff, have never had like a sports program to do. And they're part of a team, and the parents love the fact that my kids that I coach are a part of a team. So I came from wrestling, and I know what a difficult parent is. And I've had difficult parents when I coached wrestling, and, I had to have meetings with the AD and the principal and the parent all at the same time. My parents realize the value in what I'm doing for their kids. And I don't have that real issue of we're going to have a problem with the parent, because the parent's just so excited that their child with an intellectual disability is participating in a sport and is being valued by his coach, is being valued by his teammates. And I will be really honest, when we go to meets, I can't tell you how many times I am told that we are the best thing. My team and what my kids are doing and lifting and cheering for everybody else is the best part of a powerlifting meet. They're like, people come up and say, hey, look, we've gone to a whole bunch of meets and had a good time. This is the best time we've ever had because your kids are here and they are awesome. And they cheer for everybody. And they ask me all the time, can they come back tomorrow and cheer like the other lifters that are lifting them the next day and stuff? And I'm like, I wish we could, but we got to go. So like, it's just, I have a team that people want to be a part of. and I'm going to make sure that that kid's successful and the parents trust me. Um, and I appreciate that trust, and I don't take that trust for granted. And they know that I'm going to put their kid in a position to be successful at that meet in their life, and hopefully, keep them physically fit. Um, the I found on Special Olympics Florida website that of the Olympic athletes over the age of 20, 74% are overweight or obese, and 56% have strength issues. Well, you know what? The best thing for both of those things is strength training and lifting weights and being a part of a team and learning how to be physically fit. So yeah, we compete and we power lift, but I'm helping these kids develop muscle and muscular strength and muscular endurance, and that hopefully benefits them for the rest of their life. When Dave ended up having heart surgery, his heart surgeon couldn't believe how strong he was. And he was like, he's going to recover quicker from this than your typical, kid with Down syndrome would, because he is so physically fit. And I loved hearing that, he had never seen a kid so strong with Down syndrome before, that, um, and his heart was healthy. But they needed to close that hole in it to make it, fine. But he was like, his heart is healthy. It's perfectly healthy. So my parents that I have trust me, and I don't take that trust for granted. And I just want to make their kids successful. So, and if, I like to talk. I mean, obviously I've been talking over for an hour with you. So if they want to come and ask me questions, they know I'm going to answer them, and I'm going to be upfront and honest with them, and very, transparent, and tell them exactly what I'm doing.
Well, Coach, you're creating some absolute dogs down there. I mean, you're putting them on a world stage, and there's a lot to be said for that and the challenges that go along with it. So good luck in Ireland. I know that's coming up here in less than a month now. And
Yep.
I think with just talking to you and the passion, I'm sure carries through your athletes. You guys are going to put on a heck of a show.
Oh, well, I'm excited about it, and I know they are. They're training hard, and they're hitting their lifts, and we're going to get there, and we're going to have a good time.
Well, Coach, we may have to do this again because, like I said, I still got a stack of questions, but we'll see how you do when you get back from Ireland. We may have a whole new conversation.
Absolutely. And, I love to talk, and I love talking about strength training and coaching kids. So whenever you want to have me on, I'd be more than happy to be on. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Coach. And thanks for the time tonight, and have a wonderful evening.
You too, Coach. Thank you.